5, 8, 10, 12, green 18, hut. Welcome everyone to football, more football, but this time it's postseason. We have all come, and the come down is not as fun as we thought, but it turns out to be what we thought, with a few twists and turns here and there. I am, of course, Sean of Super Jam Session, the man who you all turned bald, the man you forced into baldness, into accepting baldness. I want you to know that each and every one of you are to blame for that. Your incessant bullying. I was crying at night every single day. I wondered whether I should just take my whole head off. No, I'm kidding. I was tired of it. But in any case,
you sound like such a New York Jets fan.
People, listen, I don't want this podcast to end in fourth place, so let me pass it over to Skyler. How you doing, buddy?
Here's the thing. We were going to do this last week, but I needed an extra week to recover because this season has sucked.
Well, it turns out both you and I had a pretty solidly good year, all things considered. But
No, we did not.
But the finish always sucks. It doesn't matter how good the season is. It's always about how the season ends. And it's how you stick the landing that counts. But I think what we need to do, Skyler, is just shake it off, because when you're 15 and your name's Patrick Mahomes and you won a Super Bowl, you're going to get it. So in any case, what we're going to do here is we're going to go team by team. We're going to say one major piece. I'm going to give the record that actually happened. I'm going to give the record that you guessed at the preseason post when we did this, and the one that I guessed at the preseason. We'll see how we did. Sound like a plan, Ann?
Sounds like a plan.
All right. Now, we will start with the AFC East. It is the Buffalo Bills, who finished at 11-6 and won the AFC East. Beat the Steelers in the wild card round, lost in the division to Old Faithful, the Chiefs. Your thoughts on this season? Your record, you guessed the Bills would go 14-3. How do you feel?
Disappointment.
Yeah, well, it was a disappointing season for Buffalo, all things considered. I think that they had a great time to rally, but they really cannot break that glass ceiling of beating Patrick Mahomes, can they?
I mean, they're the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah.
Their destiny is to be that good second or third team in the AFC and get smoked by the favorites.
Yeah, well, it's sad because this might have been the Bills' best shot, I thought. And by the way, for the record, this is the one that I got correct. I guessed that the Bills would get 11-6. And by the way, I will keep track of who got what correct as we go along. So that is one for Moy, that they would get 11-6 and win the division. I think we up next. Anything else to say about Buffalo?
Josh Allen is the new Brett Favre without the Super Bowl ring.
Yeah, it's tough because is this the best shot that the Bills are going to get for a while? I'm afraid so.
I mean, that's the thing. You live by the gunslinger, you die by the gunslinger.
I know, and the Packers know this better than anybody else, and we'll get to them. But next up is the Miami Dolphins at 11-6, who got into the playoffs and then lost in spectacular fashion to Old Faithful, the Kansas City Chiefs, in a game that was not close, where the only person who scored on the Dolphins was the person who had played for the Chiefs previously, Tyreek Hill. For the record, they went 11-6. My guess was 8-9, and yours was 9-8. So we were both a little bit off the mark, and yet somehow I feel like we still captured the vibe of the Dolphins. But it was a very streaky year for them. There was a time when they looked unbeatable.
Remember when they dropped 70 on the Broncos and were like, this is a team that is going to be amazing?
And decided not to beat the record because, that wouldn't be the classy thing to do. I'm like, yeah, but you've got the opportunity. It's like, that's what you'd have out of this season, scoring the most points ever. And the Dolphins are known for having those ridiculous kind of stats. Think about Dan Marino and his legacy, even though he never won one. But Don Shula has the most wins in history.
That their season their season is just defined by what if. What if they had a defense? What if their offense did not go cold at the worst possible time? What if they had gotten the game in Miami?
Yeah, what if they had played indoors is a real question, because that was a brutally cold game. And no matter who you are, I mean, it's just hard. It's just difficult for them. But you know what? It was going to get worse for the teams in this year, because here come the New York Jets at 7-10. And boy, we were kind of stupid for giving this team a winning record. Do you not agree with that statement? What evidence do we have to suggest that this team is going to be
what record did I give it?
Well, the record you gave it was 9-8. I gave it 10-7. And that disappeared in literally 4 plays, and they had 0 backup plan.
I mean, could we... I know that Aaron Rodgers is older, but he never had a career... Well, I mean, he's had injuries. It's just... We didn't expect it to end that quickly. Nobody could have predicted that.
4 plays is in spectacularly Jets fashion. And it was heartbreaking. But I will say this. As someone who listens to a lot of Jets talk radio, because I'm in the area here in Connecticut and it broadcasts out here, I will say this. The Jets fans, a lot of them, brought that on themselves. Because I heard a lot about the Jets quarterback who had done this previously, who had torn his Achilles on week 1. And it happened in even faster time with Aaron Rodgers, and then it showed they had no backup plan. They knew that Zach Wilson was not going to be the guy, and they did nothing at the trade deadline. This team brought this on themselves, and it's going to happen again next year, folks. Even if Aaron Rodgers is healthy, put no expectations on the Jets, because at the end of the day, it's the Jets. Unfortunately, that stigma just applies to some teams. When Joe Namath dies, because he sold his soul to the devil for that first ring, when he's gone, maybe we'll talk. But, sorry, Joe. I like Joe Namath. He's a good guy. Well,
but it's the Jets.
But then we get to the one you got correct, which is the New England Patriots, who finished this season at 4-13, which is what you called. I called 5-12, so I was 1 off the mark there. But the Bills still secured it. But the Pats, rough year for them. Rougher than I even anticipated. And I think you and I can also agree that Mac Jones ain't it.
But Mac Jones is not the story. The story is end of an era. Bill Belichick is gone. One of his assistants took over, but now it's a completely new regime in New England.
Well, and I think it's very fascinating, but also kind of revealing that nobody picked Bill up at the end of this coaching cycle, which I'm glad we waited to find out, because I don't think even Bill anticipated that. I think he may try to come back in a year's time, or he may like retirement enough to where he just stops and analyzes for the rest of his career. He showed he had personality in the College game day that he was in. So I wouldn't even mind it. If he takes Greg Olson's backup job, that would be kind of funny, though. That he loses his job to Tom Brady and Bill Belichick in the same year. But in any case, but R.I.P. to New England. But I'm interested to see. It's a new era in New England. And I think they're going to take it seriously. And I weirdly am rooting for them in like a very...
No, I'm not. No. The memories of the evil...
I understand.
The memories of the evil empire are still there.
Look, I took Darth Vader and won. So, like, I have to appreciate the empire just a little bit. Just a little bit. It's a new era, though.
I mean,
it's a new era
if we're comparing them to the new order, the first order, then sure, whatever. But, like, screw the evil empire.
I understand. Okay, I understand. We'll see how they
you're
do.
The Republic citizen that said the empire can't be that bad. You were the person that probably said, Darth Vader's a nice person.
When the rebellion finally did its deal and everyone was independent, they ended up missing the empire and the unity that the empire brought. I'm just saying. Moving on. Good luck, New England. I hope it all works out. Let's move on to the AFC North, where the Baltimore Ravonies, win the division 13-4. And neither of us had that one coming. I had guessed 10-7 for this team. They very much proved me wrong. And you had guessed 11-6, so you got a little bit closer, but it's safe to say that at least in the regular season, they over-delivered.
Over-delivered in what was apparently NFL's toughest division.
Yeah, and I anticipated it was going to be close. And I didn't anticipate that every team was going to have a winning record because the Browns came from out of nowhere, as they say. But it was a great regular season, and honestly, to the credit of Lamar Jackson, I did not think he was going to win any playoff games. I thought C.J. Stroud and the Texans were going to move on to there, and he proved that he could win a playoff game. I didn't think he was capable of that. Couldn't quite break the ceiling to make it into the Super Bowl, but I still have more faith in Lamar Jackson after this season than I did going into this season because of how he performed in the playoffs this year.
It just makes you wonder, though, what would have happened if he had Mark Andrews, because that is like his ultimate weapon.
Yeah, he tried. I mean, they brought him back, but it just didn't come together. It was a hard day, and also I don't think anyone anticipated just how good the Chiefs' defense was. But in any case, we're going to get to them shortly. We move on to the Cleveland Browns, who went 11-6. Would you like to hear what we gave the Cleveland Browns?
What do we give them?
I gave them 6-11, and you gave them 5-12. And speaking of defenses that over-delivered, where do you start with the Browns? The great defense, or Joe Flacco getting a resuscitation, or?
I mean, that's the thing, is that we go from Deshaun Watson to P.J. Walker to Joe Flacco,
who, by the way, revealed his demotivation to return during this season. They were talking about it as far as like he didn't really want to play. He was kind of hurt, so he just didn't want to play. That's what that guaranteed contract, that was the can of worms that opened up. And the fact that the Browns were that short-sighted when they made that deal makes it that much more laughable that we are in the situation we're in, because it was so predictable at the time that you were going to end up with this. But to the credit of the Browns, they made the playoffs this year. Nobody saw that.
I mean, that's the thing, is that their defense is elite, one of the best in the NFL. And elite defenses can still carry you to the playoffs. It's just the offense is limited in what it can and cannot do.
Yeah, and it was and it also ran into a very motivated and very hungry rookie head coach and rookie quarterback, who we're going to get to in just a second, in the playoff. Of course, they made the playoffs, lost in the wild card round. Speaking of made it into playoffs and lost in the wild card round, the Pittsburgh Steelers go 10-7. Now, I took credit for this one because we didn't get a tie this year, like either of us had anticipated, but I still think it was smart enough for us to put it in. You had chosen for the Steelers 9-8, which was close. I chose 10-6-1, which is the correct amount of wins, just they didn't get the tie.
So I'll give you half a point.
I'll take half a point. Fair enough. I'll take half for that. But
I mean, this isn't Mike Tomlin's Steelers seasons in a nutshell. Get to a slightly winning record and lose a playoff game.
Well, and it's not like that playoff game was necessarily unwinnable, though. I mean, it was just you lost T.J. Watt, and I think what that revealed is that when you lose the core of a defense, it could end up making or breaking an entire season. You needed T.J. Watt. If T.J. Watt, I will say this is a bold claim, but if T.J. Watt had been in that game, they would have beaten the Bills, I think. They probably wouldn't have beaten the Chiefs, but they would have beaten the Bills, I think. Just given the way that the Bills had been streaking, it would have been very interesting to see how that all played out. But what does this mean for the Steelers? What are they planning on doing? Tomlin's staying for at least this final year of his contract, so that brings into question, what is it? Is it going to be make or break for the Steelers next year? Are they going to have to make the AFC Championship?
I mean, the thing is that Tomlin is now the longest tenured coach with Bill Belichick gone, so he's the next one that's going to be looked at as, is it his time to leave?
Yeah, but I also think that if he does go, he's going to get a job in a heartbeat. Because there's plenty of
I mean, at
coaching
least he
years
doesn't
on him
have.
still.
I mean, at least he doesn't have the reputation that Bill Belichick does of destroying people's souls.
Well, yeah. Well, and it's also he's been doing it for so goddamn long, and when Tom Brady leaves, and then you end up doing your deal, it's difficult when Tampa Bay gets a Super Bowl with Tom Brady, and you're kind of just sit there with Cam Newton not playing well, and it's sad because I still think Bill Belichick has something to contribute to the NFL, but I think that he's trying to go all or nothing. Like, I need absolute power. Like, I'm sitting here, you have to crown me emperor, and nobody's willing to bet that much on how many years that Belichick's going to be there. 3? Tops? How long is he going to keep doing it? Well, in any case, then we get to the Bengals, who still finished the season with a winning record of 9-8, but they lose Joe Burrow. And even though I was incorrect about the injury that was going to cause it, I was correct that was going to derail the Bengals season. The records, they got 9-8. Your record for them was 14-3.
I was expecting Joe Burrow to be healthy by the start of the season, and then he wasn't, and then he was, and they were starting to look towards that way, and then he broke himself again because this offensive line cannot protect him.
Yeah, he cannot stop running. And that's the difficulty. The hardest part of the NFL right now is building an offensive line, and every general manager is struggling with this. It is hard to build a quality offensive line in the National Football League. There's no debate about that. And it is exactly why the Bengals lost the Super Bowl to the Rams. They had no line. How many times was he running around in that Super Bowl?
Every time.
All the time. He got sacked like 9 times that game, wasn't it? It was like some ridiculous number.
And I mean, this was the year where so many quarterbacks were knocked out with injury. If you don't have an offensive line to protect your quarterback, what are you going to do?
That's the story. How many was it by the end of it? Like 12 or 13 different
At least
backups?
half the league.
Almost half the league. This was the year that quarterbacks...
No, it was more than that because you lost the starters and then you lost the backups, so you had to go to the C-grade guys.
Yeah, there was quite a few people. And to the credit of Jake Browning, he gave it his all. He won some good games for the Bengals. You have to give him some credit. That's exactly what you want out of a backup to salvage the season. It's just, there was no telling that the AFC North was going to be this competitive. My record for them was 8-1, so I'll take, again, half a point because I got their losses correct. And so I'll get 1 full point on the whole AFC North. But, you take what you can get out of that. Moving right along, we have the AFC South, which was won by the Houston Texans, which neither of us saw coming. The rise of C.J. Stroud. And I'm really proud of this team with D'Amico Ryans, the rookie head coach and a rookie quarterback. No duo like this has done what they have done in the way that they have done it. And I'm really excited and hopeful for what the Houston Texans are going to develop into. These are bright days for Houston. I'm honestly thankful. We both gave them 5-12, and we gave them half of the wins that they actually got, which was 10-7.
I mean, D'Amico Ryans was the former defensive coordinator for the 49ers under Shanahan. His defenses were always tough, and Houston's defense was getting better throughout the season. C.J. Stroud was a monster. They had offensive weapons. This Houston Texans team has potential, especially in still a very lackluster division.
Yeah, and to beat the number 1 defense in the NFL in the wild card game by 35, like carving up the number 1 ranked defense in the NFL, that is nothing to shake a stick at. That's pretty impressive for his team. And so long as he doesn't have some level of sophomore slump and he can keep his composure together here now that there's expectations on his shoulders, I think he's going to do very well in Houston. And if the rumors I am hearing are true, in the event that Mike Evans does not stay in Tampa Bay, this is where I want him to land. In his hometown of Houston. And play with a kid like CJ Stroud. Because can you imagine what Mike Evans would do to the consistency of CJ Stroud's passes?
Assuming that Mike Evans still has the ability to go.
Well, to be fair to CJ Stroud, there might be a good number of drops that come along with that now. In all fairness, because it's been a little more inconsistent. As great as he is, as tremendous as we'll get to that when we get to Tampa. We'll talk about that later. Moving on to Jacksonville, who were 9-8. The story of Jacksonville, where they lost they were 8-3, and then they lost 4 in a row. It was and ended up losing the division. I had them at 12-5. I had them in the AFC Championship, which is not what happened. They didn't even not make the playoffs at all. And you had them at 10-7 and winning the division. And they still eked out a winning record, but whose shoulders do you put this on, Sky?
You have to put it on coaching. You just have to put it on coaching.
Yeah, remember when you told me at the beginning of the season when we did the Super Jam session when I said, I don't know about Doug Peterson, how good a coach Doug Peterson is, and you gave me shit about taking Nick Foles and beating Bill Belichick and Tom Brady with Nick Foles? And I said, I don't know if that was just lightning in a bottle. And now we're here at this season, and it's like, well, I don't know, because the thing is, I don't know if it is all Doug Peterson, because has Trevor Lawrence developed as a quarterback the way that you expected he would?
Not really.
Not really. It's like he's really not helping his turnover ratio a ton. And I remember when they were talking about him being drafted, how much I felt overhyped with him. And I thought he proved me wrong last year, but this has been revealing. Because I think there were opportunities that the Jags had that they very openly gave up. And it's
and also just the stories that we've been hearing about Jacksonville, the way the organization is run, the badness of their arena, the certain habits of a general manager, and a certain decisions that their president made.
Yeah, head of football operations. Yeah, they've got a wonderful group of people out there.
The fact that they had the guy that stole $25 million from them in the middle of the season is both surprising and not surprising at the same time.
Yeah, it's I don't even want to call it controlled chaos. It's just kind of chaos.
Well, maybe if they controlled their narratives.
Yeah, well, they could use a little EC3 honestly in their lives, but
but that's a whole other story for another time. Jacksonville, you suck.
Yeah, well, they were slightly above average. And speaking of slightly above average, we got the 9-8 Colts, who we both gave 7-10, and this wasn't the worst year for the Colts. But I feel like the story of the Colts this year had nothing to do with what was happening on the field half the time. It's like Anthony Richardson gets hurt and he's out for 5. He didn't play too badly, but he didn't really ever play healthy, did he?
No.
Not really. The first game, yeah, but we were hearing injuries beyond that. But I will say this, Gardner Minshew deserves a starting job somewhere. That's my hot take with the Colts. I don't know if it's with the Colts, but I think he's earned it.
Could he be any worse as a Patriots quarterback at this point?
I think he would be a good fit for New England. If they didn't, if they wanted to trade down, which there's been a lot of talk of them doing, or them taking Marvin Harrison Jr., and finding something else that they, I don't know what other trade capital, maybe Matthew Judon for Gardner Minshew. I do think Gardner Minshew has earned it. He's got his flaws, but I'm a fan. I am a fan. And I'll say this. If Tampa Bay worked out well enough for a starting job for Baker Mayfield, Gardner Minshew can find a starting job somewhere and do the same. I truly believe that.
But either way, like the Colts, it feels like they should have taken the Houston Texans route and they didn't.
Well, and the other thing is too is like Jonathan Taylor came back and didn't really do a whole lot, and that whole story between them was a big talk of the year and his re-signing. But then another halfback, I forget his name now. He started playing equally as well. So it was difficult. I think it was just a tough year for Indianapolis, and they still, to their credit, ended up with a winning record. But it never really felt like they could have made it into the playoffs, but they also fumbled opportunities that they did not have to fumble.
But either way, and I know I feel bad about this guy's health because whatever, but honestly, the second that Jim Irsay is no longer the owner of the Colts will be when the Colts get better.
Well, it kind of felt like this year was all about Jim Irsay, and I feel like this is the first real time that has come to adversely affect the franchise in a major way, in a noticeable way. And maybe it's just because this is the first time I've actually gazed eyes upon it. So, like, I could be completely wrong in stating that this is the first time that he's been a factor. Real Colts fans might be able to enlighten me on the subject, but that's the way that the party rolls sometimes. And then there's the Titans. Oh man, where do you want to start with? Where do you start with the Titans? Tanny over the hill.
The ship has sailed.
Yeah.
The ship has sailed.
Yeah. Well, I said it was a lot of old faces in Tennessee, so it's now or never, and I guess the answer is never, which explains why, we started seeing Will Levis and DeAndre Hopkins was, not playing as much, and Derrick Henry is clearly leaving.
I just feel bad for Derrick Henry because he used his prime years as a running back to prop up this team, and they don't have anything to show for it.
Well, I mean, they have made the AFC Championship a couple years ago. Like, they have made some level of playoff success. It's just like this year just felt like a nail in the coffin with them in so many ways. And now it's like, you almost feel like you have no choice but to blow it all up and see what you can do with Will Levis, who showed some promise, to his credit. But we'll see what he does when he's got the full weight of the franchise on his shoulders come next year. Because my assumption is they're going to keep him around.
Well, they have to, but they're going to have to start rebuilding properly. And that means acquiring new faces and getting rid of old faces.
Yeah. And yeah, well, we said for the Titans, you gave them 9-8. I said 10-7, and we were both pretty off with that. Gave them more credit than they deserved, apparently. And then we get to the West. And the Kansas City Chiefs, they did nothing this year. Nothing of consequence. To be fair to both of us, we both said that they were going to win the Super Bowl. We both said the Chiefs were going to win the Super Bowl. We were wrong about their opponents. We were way wrong about their opponents.
But I at least was close with mine.
Well, yours made the playoffs. I'll give you that. But and you were closer in the team you rooted for in real life as opposed to your picks. But in either case, if what I've said many times before is like, if I can't win, I might as well be right. And we were both right. So congratulations, Skyler. We both picked that they'd win the Super Bowl. We were both very overambitious about their regular season record, though. They went 11-6. You gave them 15-2, and I gave them 14-3, thinking they were going to demolish everybody. But that wasn't really the story of the Chiefs' season, was it?
I think we kind of realized that, like, they were in Super Bowl hangover, and they had lost a lot more depth than we expected.
Well, especially after losing Chris Jones, who came back later, which very much helped the flow of this defense. But Matt Nagy's offense, I don't really think ever got going all year, all season, including in the Super Bowl. Matt Nagy was not that great an offensive coordinator for the Chiefs. I don't think, because they really struggled to score points all year.
Well, the problem is that Patrick Mahomes did not have a reliable weapon outside of Travis Kelce, who, while is a great tight end and will be a Hall of Famer, is not very – he's older now. He can't do what he could do years in past.
Yeah.
And Let's say it right now. Kadarius Toney.
Boy, did the Chiefs get some buyer's remorse for taking Kadarius Toney. And I will tell you this, as somebody who's in the area with the Giants hated this dude. They hated this guy. I mean, maybe not the organization did, but the Giants fans, they knew. They knew when they traded Kadarius Toney away that they were going to win that trade. They knew that. And it did manifest itself, which is why you didn't see Kadarius Toney play for like the last third of the season or the playoffs.
But he's technically a 2-time Super Bowl champion.
It's funny how that works, isn't it?
Kadarius Toney having 2 Super Bowl rings is like Jimmy Garoppolo having 2 Super Bowl rings.
Yeah, and well, we'll get to his team. Actually, we're going into that next. You want to talk about perpetual disasters? Their record was 8-9 this year. You had given them 3-14. It didn't end up that bad, but they also abandoned Jimmy Garoppolo pretty fast, which is probably what saved most of it. And I gave them 6-11. So to their credit, they performed better than we gave them credit for. But they also did a very smart thing, which was abandon Josh McDaniels before it was all said and done. And that helped a lot.
See, here's my thing is that I thought they would keep Josh McDaniels and Jimmy Garoppolo for the entire season. I didn't think they would switch to Aiden O'Connell and Antonio Pierce, who, my God.
But you know what? I have hope now for the Las Vegas Raiders, and I'll tell you why. The whole reason that I was Rich Bisaccia was the guy who was there, who took over for John Gruden when John Gruden left for Redacted. And Mark Davis chose not to keep him, even though Rich Bisaccia got them to the playoffs, decided not to keep him, and instead went with Josh McDaniels, which was a understandable disaster. Then Antonio Pierce takes over, and instead of doing the same thing, he actually signed Antonio Pierce and said, you know what? You take the ball and you run with it. And for that reason, I'm giving Mark Davis a lot of credit. He learned his lesson. Let's see if Antonio Pierce can take this, but I bet he's going to be able to turn this franchise into something at least relatively respectable. Just you got to give him the time he deserves. Good luck, Antonio Pierce.
I will say this, and we'll kind of end on this one, is that I have friends who are Raiders fans, and they said that Josh McDaniels always felt like a Patriots guy. I wonder why.
Because he was.
But that Antonio Pierce is a Raider and will hopefully bring back the feeling of the Raiders to this team because, boy, do they need that shot in the arm.
I'm honestly enthusiastic. I am enthusiastic about what the Raiders are going to become because this was a sign that their corner has been turned, and Mark Davis is like, all right, I get it. You know, and then that's something big for the Raiders, I think. So we'll see what's to come for them. But then we get the Denver Broncos, who we both gave 6-11 and ended up 8-9. I don't know how, because they were the ones on the receiving end of the 70 burger. And oh man, I believe it was a Mr. Greenberg who once said, Russell Wilson is cooked. That is not an incorrect statement, but I still think he performed better than I anticipated he would.
He performed better than we thought he would, and then he broke down.
And it was, you know, it was almost like he had a spurt of redemption, but there is talk about they're going to bring him back. And I don't think that's the way that the Broncos need to move, especially with Sean Payton. I mean, it'd be nice for them to develop a rapport, but how long do you have left with Russell Wilson? Realistically, Sky, how long do you have left with Russell Wilson? 2 years, 3 years before his injuries get the better of him?
Well, the problem is not the fact that they have Russell Wilson. The problem is that they're in the same division as Patrick Mahomes. We're basically with the AFC East, but on the West Coast.
Well, but to the credit of the Broncos, one of the wins that they had was a 24-9 win over the Chiefs, where the Chiefs could not pass the ball at all. and they had stopped the run game. It was a great effort from the Broncos. It was maybe Sean Payton's best game, was that game this year. And they have the potential to do it, and they broke a big streak, a losing streak to the Chiefs with Sean Payton. There is a corner to be turned here, and I don't like Sean Payton, but I got to give him credit. They over-delivered here in Denver when we thought that there was no hope for them at all. So it's going to be interesting to see what this division is going to be, because then we finish off with the 5-12 Los Angeles Chargers. Because Coin Flip Staley was not flipping good coins this year. You had given them 12-5, literally the opposite of that. And I wasn't much better because I gave them 9-8. I did not think they were going to underperform this badly. But injuries plagued this team.
I feel like the Chargers Uno reversed me on my prediction, doing the exact opposite.
They did. So much so that they had to pluck Jim Harbaugh out of college.
Which I'm interested in this experiment, because him and Justin Herbert, that has the potential to be one of the worst or best coaching quarterback combinations we'll ever see in our lifetimes.
Yeah, I like this idea. I like this, and you know what? It just makes the AFC West even more competitive, if you can even believe that. And I don't know.
Does it though? Because it feels like Tom Brady and the AFC East, just this division where the greatest quarterback of all time and all these jobber teams just lining up to get knocked down one after another.
Well, I think that if Matt Nagy remains the offensive coordinator of the Chiefs, eventually their lack of being able to really just like teabag opponents is really going to come back and bite them in the ass. The fact that the Kansas City Chiefs were the only team to really make Zach Wilson look good is telling, I think. I mean, that's a defensive problem, but at the same time, like, it was kept close for that reason. You know, I don't know. I think that it's going to come to get the Chiefs eventually. But not anytime soon, because, you know, until the Chiefs lose a playoff game, they are the team to beat. And
that's kind of the problem, is that we're basically right now in this limbo where the Chiefs are going to be the team to beat every single year until they are not the team to beat anymore.
They are the tribal Chiefs. They are the tribal Chiefs, the heads of the table.
And as long as Taylor Swift continues to lord over our game, although here's my thing, and we'll wrap up on this. How much were you annoyed by Taylor Swift this year?
Okay, let me put it this way. If you're trying to get people to stop saying that the game is rigged, you gotta stop giving people like Taylor Swift this much attention and then knowingly rake in $355 million because of it. I'm not saying it was bad business. Quite the opposite. It was smart to do, but Al Michaels got kicked off of the playoffs for saying that they overindulged in the Taylor Swift. However, to the credit of CBS, they really tried their damnedest not to make her the center of attention at the Super Bowl, I thought, at least.
I mean, she wasn't the attention. It was the game.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, there were games this year where she was the center of attention. It was like, play Taylor Swift, play Taylor Swift. It got very irritating to the point where I think even she got annoyed with it. And
I'm sure she was.
It just felt like, I think it played into a lot of people's narratives about not necessarily the script. I think that's a silly narrative, but, you know, it was in Vegas where all the betting is, and it's, you know, there's such a thing as influence. And then they reveal a tape of the referees saying, oh, you shouldn't let Mahomes have it with this much time, which is like, okay, well, you shouldn't not really reveal the referees talking about Patrick Mahomes. I'm sorry. Like, if you're trying to stop this narrative, you gotta, like, not do that. Because it's like, you gotta have some level of discretion of what to and what not to. Keep your kayfabe, I guess, is all I'm saying. But in any case, it was just sad that kind of dominated the Chiefs, and it almost clouds over what they accomplished this year.
I mean, it makes it so that no one can feel good about this game except for the Chiefs fans, which is fine and all. But I think people need to get over the Taylor Swift shit because at the end of the day, it's just a person who's watching their partner play a game.
To be fair, if one individual is bringing the NFL $355 million, that might be enough money to persuade me to make sure that they're relevant.
And also the fact that, like, if it takes one woman getting a 10-second screen every other 15 minutes to ruin your life, you need to get your life choices reevaluated. Because, my God,
listen,
the thinnest skinned people.
Listen, she's all for Beatles, but a hot chick. That's the formula. That is the formula. And Travis Kelce is a smart businessman. He shot his shot, and it worked beautifully. And I wish them nothing but happiness. And, hey, if I drew 400% increase in my boyfriend's jersey sales, I'm just saying, here's the thing. I like NFL's kayfabe. I like their storylines. Let's entertain the fact that this is like the WWE, just to indulge those people who are going, Humpty Dump, it's rigged. Let's entertain that. I don't care. I enjoy the NFL's kayfabe. I enjoy their storylines. It's sad that they really need the Chiefs to be the heel that the Patriots are no longer, which is why they won 2 in a row. If we're talking in kayfabe terms, even more crushing that it's somebody who's gotten so close so consistently, but we're gonna get to them pretty soon. But it was a pretty competitive AFC. But can you really argue it was the more dominant or better division all around?
I think yes, because it had the better quarterbacks, even if a lot of them got injured, because everyone was looking at, oh, the AFC is loading up. You have Josh Allen, you have Lamar Jackson, you have Joe Burrow. You have a collection of 4 or 5 of the best quarterbacks in the game that could rival Patrick Mahomes. And these guys are going to have a chance against him, and one by one, they all fell.
Well, and that was a really wild theme this year. A very wild theme this year. And now let's move on to the NFC. We start with the East. Oh, man, I'm so glad we get to start with this team. It's the Dallas Cowboys, who win the division with 12-5. And you got closer, Skyler, because you said 11-5-1, so you're going to get half a point for that. I gave them 10-7. And we both knew that they weren't going to get far, but man, what a spectacular fashion did they lose this year. Oh, it was glorious.
I mean, hold on. Can I do the Stephen A. Smith thing?
Please do.
How about them Cowboys?
Now,
somehow they find a way to let us down each and every year. And listen, I know, it's like, are we picking on the Cowboys again? Well, yes, because it's fun.
I will say this, though, because I have friends of mine who are Cowboys fans. A good friend of mine, Rich, who I went to college with, he's a great dude. He's a great dude. So, in the back of my soul, I'm like, I really genuinely feel for the boys. Because, the thing is, Cowboys fans, they just talk a lot of smack, and then when they lose like this, their hearts get broken because Jerry Jones is just not that good of a general manager. And let's be real. It's like him having absolute control is a tough thing to do. I don't even think it's necessarily Mike McCarthy's fault. Everyone's blaming him, but I really don't think it's all on him. I really don't.
Well, maybe, and I'm just saying this, Jerry Jones should not be in charge.
Well, I think that it's the same situation as the Colts in a lot of ways. Until Jerry's gone, what are you going to do with it? And I think that Jerry's not going to be... But I feel for Jerry, too. I think he genuinely thought this year was the year. That they had a good team and they had some good games, but they had very revealing losses to the Cardinals. And they nobody anticipated that they were going to just shit the bed when it came to Green Bay and the 7th seed in the wild card round. Nobody anticipated that. And it was a spectacular collapse. But I'm going to say this, and I kind of was alluding to this before, but I think this pretty much ends the debate about Dak Prescott.
Does it, though?
Well, the thing is, they're going to keep him. They're going to have another good regular season. But this is what I was afraid Lamar Jackson was going to turn into. And thankfully, I think Lamar Jackson broke that stigma this year. He didn't break the Chiefs glass ceiling, but I think he broke the stigma this year. I really don't think Dak Prescott is going to do that. And the sooner Jerry Jones comes to that realization, the better it's going to be for the Cowboys. I truly believe that. It's a sad thing because he's regular season wise, you're going, his stats are incredible, but like, what matters at the end of the day?
The playoff wins.
The playoff wins. You know?
He does not get them.
And he does not get them. You should not have shot the bed that hard to the Green Bay Packers. There's no excuse for that.
Especially because the Packers were not that good of a team, realistically speaking.
Mike McCarthy did not throw those interceptions. You know what I mean? That defense did not completely collapse because Mike McCarthy called the plays. You know, I truly believe that they need to move on from Dak. If they're not going to move on from Jerry, CIW referee, by the way, they need to move on from Dak. And I don't know if they're gonna, so we might see another great regular season, but moving on, then we get to the Philadelphia Eagles. And boy, if you want to talk about, I want to replicate my state partner team, the Pittsburgh Steelers from a couple years ago, when the Steelers went 11-0 and then finished 11-5 and lost to Baker Mayfield in the playoffs in round 1. Philadelphia goes, hold my beer, decides to go, what was it, 10-1? That they went
and then proceed to lose like 5 of their last 7.
Finish 11-6, and then lose to Tampa Bay and Baker Mayfield in the wild card round. Pennsylvania may or may not be Baker Mayfield's bitch state. But
you're not wrong, man. You're not wrong.
When it comes to records, you had given them 14-3, and I'd given them 12-5. So we both did not expect just how spectacularly this team was going to collapse as well.
And I don't know why this team collapsed. Like, this is weird.
I think there was a lack of faith in the coach. I think Sirianni lost the team, but I don't know why. There was a lot of rumors and whispers across Philadelphia this whole year, especially as they started losing. You know, once they started getting on that train, they really did not feel like they had the vibes. And when you knew the season was over was when Tampa stopped the tush push, with or without a face mask during that play, is without anybody's business, and no one's talking about it. But, you know, they were popularizing this tush push, and they said this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and then it wasn't. And Philadelphia had this Division 1 at one point. Like, nobody was going to stop them, and then they stopped themselves. And there's a lot of finger pointing in Philadelphia, but I think everybody needs to take equal ownership in this team way underperforming when it comes to the expectations involved.
And that's the thing, is that, like, I don't know who to blame in this situation. Is there anybody to blame in this situation?
Well, I think we're going to find out. I think there's going to be a lot of details forthcoming that from probably people who are going to be traded or you know, there's not going to be this exclusive NDA signing. Or I think there's going to be a lot revealed about this season with Philadelphia. It's a very interesting thing. You know, I think they equally had that Super Bowl hangover, And Philadelphia parties hard, so this it'll be interesting to see what happens with them going forward. They kept Sirianni, and we'll see what happens. And did Jalen Hurts hit a wall? Because that's another big factor to that. It's we'll have to see. Then we can. Then comes the Giants. Well, the Giants ended up 6-11 because Daniel Jones' neck is as fragile as a communion wafer, and
Ooh.
And he went to Duke, don't you forget it. And the Giants, you called 8-9, which was closer than I called because I thought this team was going to have a dream run, and boy, it turned out to be a nightmare. I gave them 10-7, and I had them in the Super Bowl, losing to the Chiefs. But
see, here's the thing, Sean. Do you want to know where you went wrong?
Believing in Daniel Jones.
Exactly. Why would you do that?
Well, it's not Daniel Jones that was the problem. It's believing in Daniel Jones's neck that was the problem. But
dude, listen, we're talking about the guy who thinks he's Lamar Jackson and can be a running dual threat quarterback who can I'll just run and gun it, YOLO, live lifestyle, whatever. Like,
they did not have the offensive line for that at all. Because he was getting
they didn't have the offensive
line,
nor did Daniel Jones have the athleticism of Lamar Jackson to pull off that shit.
No, and the thing is, it's the difficulty too. Is like I think it only marks badly on Joe Shane, because the difficulty with this team was that they didn't get nearly enough weapons, but they also signed Daniel Jones to a $40 million a year contract when everybody knew that he wasn't worth that level of money. He had one good year out of four. And they paid him this much, and it's like, why would you do that? Even if you had one good year when they captured lightning in a bottle the year before with Brian Dable. Saquon Barkley is a bigger deal because there was the whole running back fiasco of last year's offseason. And Saquon Barkley, who is now more than likely leaving New York. And
how long have we been saying that for a while?
Well, this is the thing. They franchise tagged him this year, but with Daniel Jones taking up $40 million a year, you're going to have to make a lot of different moves than you did before. And you thankfully, you've got a decent enough defense to make that happen, but you've got to build an offensive line, and you need to give Daniel Jones some targets, and you need to give Daniel Jones some freaking time, man, because he can't do anything when he's literally running for his life all the time. But
that's what we've always been saying.
Well, and then there's discussion about like Brian Dable's style, and that Brian Dable's an asshole, and there's I think there's more to the Giants season than meets the eye, I think, here as well. Even the 3 minutes of Tommy DeVito being a thing, where he started making his own brand of actual cutlets, and he trademarked a whole bunch of merchandising after three games. This fucking guy, it cracks me up. But good for Tommy DeVito. You get that cream when you got it, and his mobster agent. And then
you have to get whatever you can whenever you can, man.
Yeah, well, that's right. You know what? Seize the day. And then the Washington Commanders, who finished 4-13, which was way worse than either of us thought they were going to do. You said 7-10-1. I said 9-1. I'm sorry, is what you said. I said 7-10. They ended up way worse, and it ended up being Riverboat Ron's unceremonious exit from Washington, which was kind of no surprise, but it is kind of a surprise, Skyler, that they lost their last 8. That is brutal.
I hate being right. Like, it doesn't give me joy to be right.
Yeah, but we didn't realize just how right you were.
Like, at the end of the day, it's just, it sucks, because, like, I like Ron Rivera. I think he's a good guy.
I do too.
It just sucks that we've gotten to this point now.
Yeah, it really does, because I do really think that he is a good coach. I think that he was handed a shit hand. And
I
a
mean, he
lot of
was
play.
handed something that nothing else could do. Like, you have to pick up the remains of whatever was left of the Dan Snyder era, and you have to try and like fix all these problems, all these gaping holes, and all these problems that existed well before you.
And at least keep the team somewhat relevant. And it's like there was no doubt that they were going to move on from Ron. He was definitely a transitional coach, and it almost felt like he was a transitional coach from the start. You know, he had Carson Wentz to begin with. I still think Taylor Heineke could have gotten a better deal out of staying there and maybe being a thing, but it's like I don't know what's going to happen with the Commanders now. It's a new era, but I don't know what that means with Dan Quinn at the helm. I really don't. And it's going to be interesting to see how the East shapes up, and who ends up emerging, in a bigger place. Because I think we've got some seismic shift happening in the NFC East. But then we move on to the North, and while we were both correct that, well, no, I guess we weren't. Let's start with the Lions, who were 12-5 this year, made it to the NFC Championship game. I had given them 9-8. You had given them 10-7. And it's safe to say that Dan Campbell has certainly earned his salt here in Detroit and done some very impressive things, and I'm very happy with how this team ended up all year. I'm really proud of the Lions.
I am too, although again, just to point this out, the Lions still lost a football game on Thanksgiving.
Well, they always do that, though. They can't break all the traditions. They can't break all the traditions. My God. Not all at once. They just broke the playoff streak. So,
But I'm proud of them. Like, this is, listen, I know the season didn't end the way that they wanted it to, but I'm so proud of them. They got to the NFC title game for the first time in forever. They proved that they are here and that they are going to be a team to be reckoned with going forward, as long as they make the right decisions.
Yep. And the thing is this was a gritty team. This was a tough football team that played a tough smash mouth style of football, a style that I very much like watching played. And the thing about Dan Campbell is he was not afraid to make ballsy decisions. Now, as with most guys who make ballsy decisions, it's a gamble. Some of those gambles paid off. Some of them didn't. Hence why the season ended the way it ended. I don't blame Dan Campbell a bit for making any of those decisions, because you got to take risks in the NFL if you want to be successful. Some of them are good decisions, some of them don't work out. That's the business. I think what Dan Campbell has installed in the attitude and demeanor of Lions culture is something that is truly special, and I'm excited to see it going forward. And Skyler, this is the first time ever that a team that has knocked us out of the playoffs or playoff contention, I've genuinely been happy to have lost to.
If there was any team that you were going to want to lose to, it was going to be the Dan Campbell-led Lions, because, my God, they're such a fun team.
They were such a fun team to watch this year. You couldn't help but enjoy watching the Lions. And even when I was playing against them, well, not me personally, but Tampa Bay was playing against them, it was just, I just had fun. I can't remember having that much fun watching a football game than the second game between Tampa Bay and Detroit. And it was just, I'm really excited to see what the Lions are capable of. But then we get to the Packers, who somehow make the playoffs and beat the Cowboys and nearly beat the 49ers,
Magic.
But the 49ers
Black
persevered.
Magic.
That's right. Well,
that's
the
how
love?
They did.
The Black Eyed Peas are saying, "Where is the love?" And it's at the quarterback position for the Green Bay Packers, and it turns out he was better than we thought he was going to be. I said 6-11. They went 9-8, and you had given them a dismal 4-13.
Just shows where my head is.
Well, we both thought that Love was going to underperform and the Packers were going to be confused for the first time in their ever. But no, turns out that Jordan Love was as ready as he was ever going to be. And
But now it's just like, great. Now we have Jordan Love leading the Packers, and once again, the Green Bay Packers luck into a really good quarterback.
well, it's kind of scary because this was as they mentioned many times, the youngest playoff team in the history of the playoffs, which means all they have to do is keep a good chunk of these people signed, and this could be a team that could make the Lions knock back down into irrelevancy if they make the right moves. And that's something I hate to see from the Packers, but that's the kind of consistency that the Packers have had and have always been synonymous with. So I guess in a way, it is good to see that some things never change, but at the same time, some things never change. And how long?
It just sucks that once again the Packers luck themselves into a really good quarterback who will lead them to an era of greatness. You just hope that this is better than the way it ended with the last quarterback.
Yeah. Well, but now here's the Booker question in me, Skyler. You know how the first Super Bowl was the Packers and the Chiefs?
Yeah.
Super Bowl 60 is right around the corner. How likely is it? Do we get heel Kansas City Chiefs Patrick Mahomes going up against the Green Bay Packers led by Jordan Love?
So basically you're asking me if I want to root for Roman Reigns versus The Rock. It's what you're doing.
Yeah, it's essentially, yeah. I'd root for the Packers in that.
You're asking me to root for The Rock in this situation.
Okay, yeah. Well, at least it's not New England versus the Packers, but yeah. Yeah.
Oh, my Lord.
Yeah. We never got that. You know, in all the years that we had the Patriots on top, we never got Packers-Patriots in the Super Bowl. Something to think about. Moving right along, the Minnesota Vikings. 7-10, which I actually got correct. And Skyler, you actually had them winning this division at 11-6, which, you know, truthfully, I think they had the potential to do if they didn't lose Kirk Cousins.
A lot of these teams failing is because of injuries and things happening to the quarterbacks that they were going to start with. And then they got Josh Dobbs, and we thought, well, they got the best quarterback they could. They're going to fix this. And then Josh Dobbs turned out to be a fluke.
Well, flash in the pan is more what I'd call it. But
same thing.
It's just tough now because I hear that the Vikings are really desperate to get a quarterback. I think that they are a team that very, very likely could try to trade someone like Justin Jefferson or Kirk Cousins to the New England Patriots for that number 3 pick to grab Caleb Williams or somebody else. So I've heard a lot of rumblings about Minnesota trying to make a power play. Now, I don't know whether they're going to do that, but with the season ending with this kind of a record and knowing that the Packers are going to be a threat in the future and knowing that the Lions have no intention of going anywhere, do you feel your back's against the wall now with Kirk Cousins that, you know, this is basically it? Or do you keep
it basically is because, like, you have no other choice but to keep going for it because how else are you going to be able to do this?
Yeah, and it's a sad situation for Minnesota because I think that they had, you know, there was a lot of expectations there, but that loss to the Giants, I don't think they ever really recovered from losing that playoff game to the Giants. And then losing the debut game to Tampa Bay, which also probably did not help. But then we get the Chicago Bears, who also finished at 7-10, which I also called at 7-10. And then you also got them at 6-11. But the Bears, they took the step forward that I thought they would. There's coming together, but you really have to wonder, is management going to decide that they don't want to keep the progression going and take a number 1 pick quarterback? Or do they now try to build up and take somebody like Marvin Harrison Jr. now with number 1? Now that the Panthers were as bad as they are, we're going to get to them in a second. The Bears have a lot of deciding to do What do you do if you're in this situation? Because they're keeping Eberflus. They've got some tools with them. Do they keep Justin Fields, or is it time to move on?
I think you have to keep Justin Fields. He proved that he can be an NFL quarterback. You just need to get him the right people around him. And the other thing, too, is that I don't trust Caleb Williams. I don't know if Caleb Williams is going to be the guy.
No, and there's quite a few names that have risen up in popularity, like Michael Penix Jr. And that kid, what's his name, Joe McCarthy from Michigan. I've heard a couple people shout his name out, which is kind of surprising. But there's still discussion about all these other quarterbacks. But I think right now the biggest thing that'll help Chicago is stability. Is not making overhaul every couple of years. Because the record wasn't as great as it was. But you know what? You got 4 more wins than you did the year before. That's not nothing. And it's worth giving this some time to grow, I think. So I don't think this was a terrible season for Chicago. Maybe it could have been better, but it could have been way worse. And now you've got some capital to work with on top of that.
You just have to wonder whether or not this is going to be a thing where if they didn't have the first overall pick for this year's draft, would the Chicago Bears be in a more desperate situation? They lucked into having the first overall pick, thanks Carolina, and now you have to wonder whether or not they got real lucky with it.
Yeah, it's hard to say. It really depends on what they do with it and if that pick can deliver. The number 1 pick is a very difficult weight to have on your shoulders. Ask this man, head of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who ended up, as we move on to the NFC South. Tampa Bay wins the division 9-8 with the divisional advantage, which is way better than either of us had given them credit for, as you had given them a solid 3-14. And I had given them 6-11. And I will let you do some commenting first, and then I will give my very brief thoughts about Tampa Bay's season.
Good on you guys. Good on you for doing something. There are 2 teams that I'm very proud of, and Tampa Bay is one of them because, my God, did they put on a show. It wasn't pretty at times. It was very much not pretty at times.
Yes.
But for what the season could have been, I thought you guys had a great season nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, over-delivered is not even putting it correctly. Baker Mayfield put this team, who had lost Tom Brady the year before, after Tom Brady had finally sucked for the first time in his career. Let's be real about it. And it's not his fault.
Let me talk to you.
It's not his fault. He had the whole divorce thing going on. It was with a Bucs trainer that you cheated on him with. I'm not saying it was not his fault. It's not his fault. At the same time, he was not great. Baker Mayfield said, I will take the challenge of having this team that is going to lose some pieces, that is way over the cap space. I'm going to get paid nothing for it, and I'm going to prove to you that I am better than what every single human being is saying about me right now. And he put up points. He kept his interceptions low, except for the very last one. God damn it. But you know what? That being said, nobody expected this team to play the way it did. The problem is, and the problem will remain, Todd Bowles is just not that good of a head coach. And
even with the performance that they had?
Even with the performance that they had. But here's the thing. He has earned his keep. He's earned his coaching job, right? Everyone was calling for Todd Bowles' head, but let's be real. There was a timeout left on the board. I understand it's the end of the game, but still, it's the playoffs, for fuck's sake. And there are quite a number of times where you could very overtly blame the coaching's ineptitude for why the game was lost and why Tampa Bay was not as efficient as it could have been. And I'll spoil it for you. It wasn't Dave Canales that made this team good. Okay? It was not. It was Baker Mayfield installing a very similar grit that Detroit had, I thought. A very gritty style, a smash mouth style, a very supportive leader that they got in Baker Mayfield. And I really do hope, and the word about town is that they're doing their best to take Baker Mayfield and keep Baker Mayfield. And if the rumors are true, I don't know if this is going to be what he gets paid, but if the rumors are true that he's only wanting like 25 million to stay, and he allows Tampa Bay some more of that cap freedom, then it really goes to show that he's, Tampa Bay really has been asking his opinion on who, Baker wants as the coaches around him for an offensive coordinator and so on. I think that there's hope in Tampa Bay that I don't think people anticipated would be there. And that's a special thing, and I'm very thankful for that. And as you said, Sky, this season went way better than I thought it would. The fact that we beat the Eagles again, who are our longtime playoff rivals. Tampa Bay and the Eagles have a long history of meeting in the playoffs. To beat the defending NFC champions in the playoffs with Baker Mayfield was so much more than I could have asked for, than anyone could have asked for in Tampa Bay. So it was a great year. I have no regrets. And to lose to such a heartwarming, gritty team like Detroit, as I said to you, Sky, that game, Detroit and Tampa Bay, in that divisional round, may be one of the greatest games of football I've ever watched. If only Todd Bowles had just used that one timeout and given us one final chance to win. But you know what? It's all good. It's all good because there is way more hope in Tampa Bay than anyone would have anticipated there'd be after losing someone like Tom Brady. And I credit Jason Light for doing that. I credit Todd Bowles as much as he was involved for doing that. I credit Todd Bowles' defense is what kept us in a lot of those games. You say what you want about his head coaching skills, but his defensive mind is unparalleled. He's a master of the blitz.
But now here's the question: is you did very well this year, and I'm not going to take anything away from that. But you didn't have any expectations. So now that you have some expectations, what's going to happen?
I think that the thing is, I think Baker Mayfield is going to be more grounded than he was before. I think this is a different kind of Baker Mayfield. And yeah, he still had a clunker game or two. But he's about to have a kid, which means, he's going to stay great. If he really stays grounded in himself, and I think that's going to help him, I think Baker Mayfield is going to blossom into quite a good quarterback for Tampa Bay. I'm not saying that he's going to win the division for 4 years straight, but I think that they're going to be in it for a while. I think the difficulty is going to be keeping the defensive pieces together or upgrading said pieces that you're going to inevitably lose. Like, inevitably, eventually, you're going to lose Levante David. Either he's going to go somewhere else, or more than likely, he's going to retire. Because he's been a Buccaneer for a very long time. There's a reason I have his jersey. I love him so much. But he is the heart and soul of this defense. When you take him out of that equation, what is this defense going to look like? There's a lot of factors that are going to contribute into what Tampa Bay's identity is going forward. But I'm glad that Baker Mayfield is going to present some level of stability that Tampa Bay really needs after losing the GOAT. Then there's the Saints, who also went 9-8, but lost their first matchup to Tampa Bay, and convincingly enough, and point differential and blah, blah, blah. You had given them 9-8. You got that one correct, Skyler.
Yay.
I had given them more credit at 11-6, but, the real story here is that our boy Jameis Winston just deciding to say, fuck the coach, on the last play of the season. What do you make of
Are you convinced that's what happened?
Derek Carr ended up being Derek Carr. Are you surprised?
No, I was not.
I was a little bit, but I am a little disappointed that it ended up the way that it ended up. But this team, I can't say anything good about them out of obligation to Tampa Bay because they are like the bottom of my tier list of the NFC
And also,
South.
we shouldn't say anything good about them because it's the New Orleans Saints. Bountygate. Enough said.
Well, I also blame Sean Payton a lot more for that than I do like the current Saints organization right now. But
they're paying for the sins of Bountygate. Let's be honest.
Well, they're certainly they're paying for something. They are definitely paying for something, and we'll have to see whether they make any sort of moves this offseason. But you haven't really heard much about them lately. So who knows what's going on? I'm amazed Dennis Allen still has a job. I won't lie to you there. If Jameis Winston is just going to blatantly disregard Dennis Allen, like, what kind of control do you have over the state of that team? That's all I'm saying about them. Atlanta. Arthur Smith, who is no longer there, gets them to 7-10, which we both thought they were actually going to do worse than that. I called 4-13. You gave them 5-12. But did this season for the Falcons not kind of go the way you thought it would?
Pretty much.
Pretty much.
But let's be honest, okay? The Falcons are one of the worst teams in terms of, like, picking coaches. They're not very good at doing it.
Yeah, they sure aren't. Because they chose Raheem Morris, who I had the misfortune of having coached Tampa Bay for 3 years during the Josh Freeman era of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Oh, Lord.
Oh, Lord, indeed. So if anyone is wondering whether I paid my dues as a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan, the answer to that is yes. And there was one good year where we went 10-6 and still missed the playoffs. And everything else was ass. Fat ass. And yes, he is a great coordinator, but he is not a great coach. At least to the credit of Todd Bowles, he's learning. He's developing as a head coach. I will give him that credit.
That's not much credit to give.
It is credit, though, because, I mean, it is. He failed miserably with the Jets because he had no team with the Jets. He was gifted a great team in Tampa Bay and lucked out with a quality quarterback in Baker Mayfield. And he's been in the playoffs now in 3 games, so he's still learning how to handle that. You got to give credit to the coach to grow as well. And I'm giving Todd Bowles more of a benefit of the doubt in that respect. I don't really give the same to Raheem Morris, but maybe he'll prove me wrong. I hope he doesn't, but he might. But
I think you're giving way too much credit.
But I think that, well, saying he might is giving way too much credit is a hella indictment.
Listen, they could not do any worse than Arthur Smith or whatever. The fact that he is now the Pittsburgh Steelers offensive coordinator is hilarious.
Well, we'll see if they can keep a healthy quarterback themselves.
They won't.
Well, they're trying to go after Justin Fields, at least the word about town is, but at the time of recording, that is, who knows what will have happened by the time this aired. But then we get to Carolina.
Lord.
Now, you had given them you had given them 6-11. I had given them 7-10. And instead, we got ourselves a wonderful Frank Reich improved 2-15. And the bigger news here, Sky, I think, is that we now have a new leader in worst owner in football.
I don't know. Atlanta's giving me a pretty good chance, but yeah.
Dude.
This guy's pretty bad, too.
They hired Dave Canales, who was the offensive coordinator of Tampa Bay for 1 year, where they didn't figure out that they couldn't win with draw play, check down behind the first down marker, punt, all game until week 15. And they signed him to be the head coach after they fired Frank Reich 15 or 11 games into the season. This dude threw a drink at fans, did David Tepper, during a loss. This is next level dysfunction. This is next level dysfunction with the Panthers. And they don't even have the number 1 pick because they traded the world for Bryce Young, who ended up being
Not good.
Eh.
But again, what were you going to do with the fact that you had no protection for him?
No protection for him, no targets for him, no defense to keep him off the field and resting.
Ugh.
Ugh. Ugh. It's a big fat ball of ugh. And I don't know what to say, Panthers fans. It's going to be something, but I think you got some rough years ahead. I'm afraid. Where's Cam Newton when you need him? Just oh right, he's bitching about the next team we're going to talk about. Well, here we are, Skyler. They went 12-5. You gave them 13-4. I gave them 10-7. It is your Super Bowl attending San Francisco 49ers. I'm going to say a quick piece and then I'm going to let the floor be yours. I am still very proud of this team for making the Super Bowl. Because the Lions were surging and they did not have to win that game, but they did win that game. And I was terribly afraid that they were going to lose that game to the Lions to make it Chiefs-Lions, the game that started the season, ends the season. I'm thankful that did not happen, and that the 49ers were able to make it to the Super Bowl and also bring it to overtime. You know, it's a shame how it all ended by when it all got settled and taken care of, you know, whatever fashion you want to call that. But there is still a lot of good to be made out of this season. That being said, this felt like the best shot. This felt like the shot, the moment to capture the gold. It felt like it was in your hands. And coming up empty here, as I'm sure you're about to register as somebody who is there, right there in the thicket, it has got to be devastating. You know, this was the expectation that this was going to be it. And I don't know where you go from here and who you rest that on the shoulders of. I don't really think it's entirely Brock Purdy's fault. I think there's something to be said about the way that Shanahan runs this team when it comes to do or die time. Because you can't say that any of those games in the playoffs didn't have we were just about to lose that energy to them. The one against the Packers did. The one against the Lions did. And the one against the Chiefs did in regulation, and especially did, you know, when they actually finally lost. I don't think Shanahan is capable of handling those kinds of high-pressure situations without increasing the blood pressure of everyone involved. The difficulty is, like, who do you replace him with? He's giving you such consistent success, but it's so frustrating to be this maddeningly close and not being able to grasp it. I don't know where you go from here, and I love this team, and I love what John Lynch has done for it. As someone who is a fellow Buccaneer, I love what John Lynch has done for this team. But it's a crossroads for San Francisco now, and I don't know where we go from here. Let's hear it from the source himself. The floor is yours, Sky.
This was it. This was the chance, and it's over. I'm not sure where we go from here, if I'm being honest. I really don't. Because this was the chance to win the title. I want people to know, I'm 30 years old. I was born the last year that they won the Super Bowl. And I don't know if I'm going to see a Super Bowl in my lifetime.
Maybe not in this current form of a team. It's hard to say now. Because, like, you're not going to be able to keep all these pieces. Where do you fit upgrades? Like, you really have to say that this team was so brilliantly assembled. Where do you start to address problems? Because I don't think really it's the fault of many of the players. Do you? Like, where do you think the problems are that you have to, like, address now? Because it was overall a very successful season, but you don't come away feeling that way.
None of us do. None of us feel happy about the season.
And it's a hard it's a hard because Shanahan's not going anywhere because you're still making the Super Bowl, right? Like you're still there, but it's just like to me it kind of feels like even though you're at a taller scale and at a larger scale, this is very much what the Bills are going through right now. As the like, did we hit our peak, and now are we in the kind of the falling action here? And I'm afraid that that's the case with San Fran. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be if Brock Purdy progresses and it's just that it just worries. I'm worried that this team is going to slowly get plucked at by free agencies and draft capital and all of the offseason shenanigans, which it seems to be accelerating season by season more therein. Kind of like how the NBA is like, hey, let's everybody switch teams now. And it kind of very much feels that's becoming kind of part of the dynamic of what NFL off seasons are. Is there a chance that this team remains this consistently good come next year?
I really don't know. And that's the problem, is that it feels like we are reaching a point where who knows what this team's going to do. I don't know if they have it anymore. We'll see. I'm hopeful, but I'm not optimistic.
Well, the good thing is, at least in this division, it seems like you've got only one realistic threat, and that's the Los Angeles Rams, who went 10-7 this year, which was more than either of us gave them. You gave them 8-9, I gave them 9-8, and they ended up making the playoffs.
I mean, no one could predict Puka Nacua being a thing.
Yeah, he ended up being tremendous, and to the credit of Matthew Stafford, he got injured for a little while, but he played pretty consistent ball throughout the entire year. He hasn't gone anywhere. It makes you scratch your head. What the hell happened last year? Even still, it's like, how did it break down that hard for the Rams? Because they should not have been that bad last year. And yet
injuries.
Yeah,
it's injuries.
It gets every team. It gets every single team, but the Rams, they were able to still put it together, and they nearly pulled it out against the Lions too. They really had very intense matchups. It goes the whole NFC playoff bracket was very close, I thought, except for Dallas, and except for the NFC East, they were quality games, and it was it's wild that the Rams are even in this position, but they also feel like a team that the future is brighter in. There's going to be some changes made, but you have to wonder how long Matthew Stafford's going to do it. But I think the Rams are still they're still in it, but they've got some growing space, and it really makes you wonder if that's going to be, that might be the point of contention, or are the Rams going to be able to take that spot back from the 49ers? And I don't have an answer for that. It's a long ways away, but I'll tell you who's not going to have a say in the mix: Pete Carroll. The Seattle Seahawks. 9-8 this year, which is still a winning record, but they fired Pete Carroll anyway. I gave them 11-6.
Geno Smith is not it.
Well, Geno Smith had a resurgence, but then went back to Geno Smith. And no disrespect, I like what he did. I like what he accomplished. But they've still got to go through it at least one more year. And they kind of blamed Pete Carroll and forced him out instead. We both gave them 11-6, and it's safe to say they under-delivered.
Yeah, but in hindsight, we should have been more. We should have seen it more that they were a fad last year.
Well, and I also do believe that they've been trying to get rid of Pete Carroll for a while, and I think that their backs were kind of against the wall in that respect. And it's funny that just them not making the playoffs was enough for it, considering they still ended up eking out a winning record. But I
mean, coaches have been fired for less. Coaches have been fired while winning playoff games.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. Marvin Lewis made it to the playoffs consistently and just kept losing. But
And then he stopped making the playoffs.
and then he stopped making the playoffs, so I guess that one is a little more justified. But then,
But I remember when the Tennessee Titans that year that Marcus Mariota caught his own pass for a touchdown,
I remember
proceeded to lose a football game, and they got the coach fired for that.
Yep. Yeah, there was times. I mean, Mike Vrabel gets fired for the 6-11 season, and then doesn't get a job when it was very much not Mike Vrabel's fault. I don't think that they were in that point, but you know what? There's a lot of teams trying to make moves and move on, and and then there's Arizona, who finished 4-13. I gave them 3-14. You thought they were going winless.
Yeah, I didn't expect Josh Dobbs, the passer, not to be a thing.
Well, they probably would have gone winless had Joshua Dobbs not put in the effort that he had. And Kyler Murray, going back and playing some pretty dynamic ball towards the end of the season, kind of reminding you why he was what he was.
And then him choking at the end of the season, reminding you why he is what he is.
Yeah, and now it's going to see what we do with this this new coach, Jonathan Gannon, who was not terrible. It wasn't his fault that he had no team. And we'll have to see how they build this year, because they've still got some, they've got a pretty good pick in this draft, and we'll see what kind of moves they make. They still believe in Kyler Murray. Should they?
Probably not.
Probably not, but at this point, with the amount of money you're giving him, who's going to take that contract?
Yes.
Exactly. But we're left with who's beating the Chiefs? Who's stopping the tribal chiefs? And any final words you've got to say on this to wrap up this season, Skyler?
I know that we attempted to try and predict the NFL season. I think at the end of the day, you cannot predict the NFL season. This season, more than any other, has been so weird and different.
It was wild. It was a wild season.
And yet we remain with the same result. I don't know who's going to beat the Chiefs. We'll have to see how the offseason plays out. But, man, it doesn't feel hopeless right now.
Well, they have successfully built their heel program. And they leaned into it. Speaking of people leaning into stuff, the Chiefs leaned into it a little bit heading into the end of this year. So, you know what? We'll see if Patrick Mahomes can handle the mantle of being the top heel in the NFL. The way that they're...
I mean, he was the chosen one. He was the chosen one.
So we'll have to see. I'm interested to see what happens in the NFC, because a lot can happen, and a lot can happen during the season. We didn't do too badly, though, with the guesses. I think we collectively came up with some pretty decent picks, but, anything could happen in the NFL. It's any given Sunday, but we'll have to see what happens.
Can you do a recap of the final predictions and how we did?
So the final predictions, let's see here. So we got, let's see how many you got correct. I believe you got the Pats at 4-13. You got the Cowboys at 11-5. You got half a point for the Cowboys. You got the Saints, and that, I believe, might be it. That might be it.
I mean, that's not good.
That's not terrific. It's not terrific. And meanwhile, I got the Bills correct. I got half of the Bengals. I got half of the Steelers. I got the Vikings and the Bears. And I think that's it. So maybe we didn't do too great. But you know what?
But it is what it is. Like, the NFL, in such an unpredictable sport and unpredictable league, you never know what's going to happen.
All right, good job, Bookers. Can't wait to see what you guys come up with next year. And in the meantime, go listen to Taylor Swift until you cry and feel feelings. Good night, people.
Because we're in bad blood now, I guess. I don't know.